Surah 101 of the Holy Quran is known as Surah Al-Qari'ah, and indeed is one of the most interesting and intriguing chapters within the Holy Book. A chapter that seeks to examine and provide us with an understanding of what will occur on the Day of Judgment and what precedes it. Indeed, you find that many times in the Holy Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will mention to us verses in regards to the Day of Judgment. There are different stages of this understanding of the verses leading up to the Day of Judgment. At one stage you find a particular period when everything ceases to exist. And indeed at another stage you find that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides to raise us all again. And indeed when you look at Surah Al-Qari'ah, there is a recognition here that look at the state of you when that particular day is announced to all of you. Sometimes you may find the translation of Al-Qari'ah as being the Calamity, whereas that really does not provide you with the apt translation that this particular chapter deserves. Therefore, when you look at Surah Al-Qari'ah, you find that although it's only made up of 11 verses, you find that each and every one of these verses has something of particular importance to us, not just for the future, but for the present as well. Someone asks, why does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talk about, or why does God talk about the Day of Judgment so much within the Holy Quran? And especially within the verses in Mecca. Well, you're dealing with a group of people in Mecca, a group known as the Quraysh, who in many cases would be so arrogant that they'd say, what? Do you really think we're going to be raised again? You really think there's going to be a day when all of us are going to come back to answer for everything that we've done? You really think there's going to be a day where we're going to be in fear about everything we've done? You see, a person who doesn't believe in a Day of Judgment, that person in some cases will be someone who lives in this world in no fear whatsoever. If they are unjust to someone, they don't care about a day where they're going to be questioned. If, for example, they've been rude or arrogant towards a group of people or oppressive, they don't really get any scary thoughts about a day where they're going to have to come and see what they've done and answer for it. They don't believe that there's a court case coming up for them at all. And indeed, you therefore find that when the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family comes to the Arabs, there are three main areas he wants to instill in them: an understanding of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. On the second level, prophethood and the recognition of his position as the Prophet of God, peace be upon him, and his family. And on the third level, an understanding of the Day of Judgment. Hence, in many of our mosques, if you were to ask people, what are the usul al-deen? They'll always mention to you Tawheed, and they'll mention to you Nubuwah and Qiyamah. Yes, usul al-madhab, they may refer you to Adal and Imamah. But when you come to usul al-deen, you'll always hear Tawheed, Nubuwah, and the belief in Qiyamah or the belief in Ma'ad. When you come to understand these, you understand that these are the pillars of the religion. The belief in monotheism, prophethood, and the Day of Judgment. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes that moment when that day comes in different ways. Sometimes you hear the description of the zalzala that occurs. Sometimes you hear the description of al-haqqa. Sometimes you hear the description of al-waqi'ah. Here Allah talks of al-qari'ah. All of these are different words used for the Day of Judgment and what will occur with that particular event. And you see that the word Qari'ah is mentioned 5 times within the Holy Quran, and 3 of them are in this surah. The other 2 being in Surah Al-Haqqa and in Surah Al-Ra'd. When you look in Surah Al-Haqqa, of course, you see the words are very clear. Al-Haqqa mal-Haqqa wama adraka mal-Haqqa كذبت ثمود وعاد بالقارعة. Likewise here, the surah begins in a very similar way. Now the benefits of reciting the surah are numerous and indeed very interesting. And sometimes people don't pick up on the benefits of reciting a surah of the Holy Quran. Sometimes I find people saying to me, you know what, I'm really getting affected by the Dajjal system. I'm really getting affected by shaitan. I feel that I'm in a position where there isn't much rizq in my life. I find that I'm in a position where I don't see much prosperity. And many times if you were to read the traditions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, you'll find that they've emphasized on certain chapters of the Holy Quran which will give you that peace of mind in these difficult states. And one of the chapters which gives you that peace of mind is Surah Al-Qari'ah, because the first of the benefits of Surah Al-Qari'ah, interestingly, is that if ever you want to read a surah of the Holy Quran which protects you from the Dajjal system, from the Antichrist, then recite Surah Al-Qari'ah. Now someone might turn around and say, what do you mean that Dajjal system? Is the Dajjal this one-eyed imposter who's locked up in an island somewhere? You see, ourselves and our brothers, we differ on this particular conception of the Dajjal. You find some schools in Islam say, yes, the Dajjal is actually locked up on an island and that he will emerge at the end of the time and that he'll come to the people and promise them great rewards and be the ultimate deceiver. And that you find that Rasulullah would say to us, beware of Al-A'war Al-Dajjal. That the prophets before him had mentioned the Antichrist or the Dajjal, but he tells them that, and I tell you that he is the one-eyed imposter. And so some people would take the Dajjal, when they look at him, some people would say, well, you know what, that must be an individual with one eye. On the contrary, in the school of Ahlul Bayt, we believe that the Dajjal is a metaphorical conception of a system whose symbol may be the one eye, and this particular symbol can be seen throughout our lives in the media industry today, in the film industry, even in the fashion industry that surrounds us. And let's not beat around the bush and say that we're not being affected by the Dajjal. From the speaker to the listener, each and every one of us faces a test with the Dajjal. And I tell you that the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family would always stress that beware of the cunningness of the Dajjal. The Dajjal can come to you to the extent that you'll see certain people in the Muslim community will listen to certain tunes or music, and when you tell them to actually stop, they'll actually turn around to you and say to you, but I can't stop. And you say to them, why? And they'll say to you, well, you know what, I want to go to sleep, but I need music. I want to drive, but I need music. I have a wedding, I need music. That need means that you've been trapped into a system which you can't even get out of. You can't drive or sleep or have happiness without it being around you. So the Holy Prophet, when he was asked, and Imam al-Sadiq narrates these hadiths for us, that when they were asked what's the best of the surahs to help us against the Dajjal system, and the Dajjal system's always been there in existence, the reply was recite Surah Al-Qari'ah. All you have to do, 11 ayahs of Surah Al-Qari'ah. Al-Qari'ah, mal-Qari'ah, wa ma adraka, mal-Qari'ah, yawma yakunu an-nasu kal-farash al-mabthuth, wa takunu al-jibal kal-ahn al-manfush, فأما من ثقلت موازينه فهو في عيشة راضية وأما من خفت موازينه فأمه هاوية وما أدراك ما هي نار حامية. Look, in a matter of 15-20 seconds, you're able to recite a surah of the Holy Quran, a surah that just in case you've been affected by this system, then don't forget that big rattle that's gonna come one day and you're going to be turning round like moths scattered. So the first opinion is what? The first benefit is what? The first benefit is against the Dajjal system. That when it's going to affect you, keep reciting Surah Al-Qari'ah and it will be beneficial for you. The second benefit is very interesting, that the hadiths of the Imams of Ahlul Bayt tell us, write it on a piece of paper and hang it at home, because this will actually increase the rizq in your household. Sometimes you may feel that you've been the victim of some people say we're the victims of bad luck, for example. Things aren't going too well for us. And so the reply that comes is, well, why don't you write Surah Al-Qari'ah on a piece of paper? And sometimes, our mothers and our grandmothers, they may not necessarily be as educated as some of us claim to be today. But I tell you what, their faith and the way they actually stay on that prayer mat is phenomenal. And sometimes you may see them writing supplications or writing verses of the Holy Book. And you know what's so beautiful about that? They knew that these verses, if you hung them up on the wall in a house, it would increase the rizq of that household. And increasing rizq doesn't just mean wealth. Increasing rizq can be, for example, the increase of children in that household, the increase of education in that household, the increase of good health in that household. So you find that the benefits of Surah Al-Qari'ah are really phenomenal. They are benefits for this world and benefits for the hereafter. And you know what I love about Surah Al-Qari'ah? Surah Al-Qari'ah begins, in my opinion, like a major news flash on a television channel. You see, if there's a news flash on a television channel and the news flash is made up of one word only, straight away you're like, did I just hear the word flood? Did I just hear the word bomb? Did I just hear, for example, the word death? When you say it with one word, it makes a difference to, for example, saying, and today there was an event that occurred in the northeast of England and it was a flood. When you've taken 11 words to get to the point, sometimes that person's gone, made a cup of tea, come back and there's no effect. When you begin by saying flood, in the northeast of England, straight away that one word by itself has an effect. And that's the beauty of the Quran. Sometimes the rhetorical expression of the Holy Quran is beautiful. The surah doesn't begin by saying, by the way guys, there'll be a calamity in the not too distant future. The surah begins by saying, Al-Qari'ah. And that Al-Qari'ah straight away gives you a point. It shoots a point home to you. That you Arabs, you know what Al-Qari'ah means, don't you? The Arabs knew. They would always refer to, for example, the idea of Qar' or Qara'a, and the idea that when two things collide with each other, there's this unbelievable bang that occurs. And it's not a bang that's pleasant. It's not like, when you're walking one day, for example, down the road, or you're sitting at a restaurant and you see a crash occur. All of us never ever forget the noise that is made from that crash. That is what's known as a qari'ah, yes? But a noise that is unpleasant. You see, sometimes two things can smash together and it's a pleasant noise, for example. Whereas when you see two things smash together and you hear this noise which rattles you in your position, that is the qari'ah. The Arabs would only use that when two things are colliding with each other. That's it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, wait. You know how you use it when two things collide? I want you to now forget that definition. I want you to now, whenever you hear the word qari'ah, understand there's going to be a day where you're going to hear a sound that is going to be a deafening sound. It's going to shake you. And you know what? When I'm saying al-qari'ah, yes? When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala begins al-qari'ah, what's the natural thing when I hear something like, for example, when I hear the sound, the terrible shake, the rattling, I'm going to say, Mal Qari'ah. What rattling? What's going on? And then the reply would be, Wama adraka mal Qari'ah. Yes? And what do you think you guys know about Al-Qari'ah? You see Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, whenever He says, Wama adraka, the answer is given straight away. Yes? Maybe Wama yudrika, you don't get a reply back. But with Wama adraka, straight away there is an answer given. And it's beautiful. It's like, the great sound. What is this great sound? What do you think you know about this great sound? You people don't have a clue what this sound is. You think that this day of judgment is not going to come. You see, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks of different cries that will come leading up to the day of judgment. In one, maybe the loss of the life of the human being. In another, for example, the loss of the end of the life of everything that exists in this world. And then the third one is this one, yes? And there's this deafening sound. And when this deafening sound occurs, I don't care where you are in the world, and you will wake up and you'll be like, what is that sound? What is that qari'ah, that seizing sound that's affected all of us right now? And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala answers this question, yes? Because when He says, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ, always Allah gives the answer. وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا الْقَارِعَةِ يَوْمَ يَكُونَ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. Yes? That on that day, listen to what happens to the human being. The human being is such an arrogant being that they walk around thinking, you know what? I can never get affected by no day of judgment. You must be joking. I can lie, I can backbite, I can gossip. There's no day of resurrection. You see, the day of resurrection is vital for the conscience of the human being. On the first level, when you oppress another human, if you think you've got away with it in this world, listen, there's a day you guys will realize that you will answer for everything that you've done. And on a second level, you find that then when I realize there's a day of judgment, when I have been oppressed, I realize, you know what, if I don't get my due rights in this world, then I'll get my due rights in the hereafter, yes? Some of these Arabs, your Abu Lahabs, your Abu Jahals, they used to mock, which day of judgment? Umayyah used to say, مَنْ يُحْيِي الْعِظَامَ وَهِيَ رَمِيمٌ. What? You're telling me my bones, when they're all powder, who's gonna resurrect them, yes? And the reply is, قُلْ يُحْيِيهَا الَّذِي أَنْشَأَهَا أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ. You see, you guys are mocking the day of judgment. I'll tell you what your state will be. When this qari'ah occurs, يَوْمَ يَكُونُ الْإِنسَانُ كَالْوَاتِ يَوْمَ يَكُونُ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوثِ. That the people will be like what? Al-farash al-mabthuth. Sometimes in our houses we talk of al-farasha, for example, yes? And some might refer to it as the moth or the butterfly and so on. You firstly, when we're going to hear that particular rattling sound, the first thing that's going to happen to us is we're going to be like, yes, we're going to be like the moths, going back and forth in absolute chaos. If you see, sometimes there are these moths which they're around the light and you just see them buzzing one way and the other, yes? And you'll see the movement, and the movement will take place in no real orderly direction. Likewise with us, when we hear that particular sound and we know we will be moving one way and the other, and we know that there is something happening over here because that sound has absolutely shaken us. This Qari'ah has shaken us. That al-nas, yes, all these people, يَوْمَ يَكُونَ النَّاسُ كَالْفَرَاشِ الْمَبْثُوث, like that moth that's scattering one way, moving the other, that's the way, yes? وَتَكُونَ الْجِبَالُ كَالْأَحْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. And you find that those mountains will be like what? Al-Ahn al-Manfush refers to this idea that the mountains, you see these grand mountains, yes? They'll become like that wool which you see, which is being put into position. Mountain to wool, this is something unbelievable. Firstly, the highest creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is compared to a moth. Secondly, one of the highest in size creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is compared to wool. Or let's say, for example, today, let's say cotton even. You're compared to that mountain. Who would think a mountain that is so grand in size, that mountain would become like what? That mountain would become like wool. That the human being will become like moths. That human who walked around arrogantly on the earth saying, I'll never be resurrected, Muhammad is speaking nonsense. Or that same human in the year 2014 say, what's all this nonsense that there's going to be a second day of resurrection? How many worlds have we gone through? When we were in our womb, if you told us that there's a world called earth, I tell you none of us would believe. Now we're on earth. If you tell someone there's a day of judgment, I tell you they won't believe. When you bring them on the day of judgment, if you told them there's a heaven, I'm telling you even then they won't believe. We've already been through a couple of worlds. What's there to deny that there's another world which is waiting for us? So the sound, it rattles you. It's a bang and it's going to shake you. And you, the human being, are going to be like that moth. You're in chaos. Your orderly mannerisms which you used to walk around in haughtiness, now you're going to be like a moth scattered in different directions. And that mountain that you used to look up to, now you're going to see it fall and crumble, yes? And then the Quran says that when you're looking at all of this take place, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. And this is the main point. You see, I can talk with you all day and all night about the Day of Judgment. All it comes down to is what? It comes down to, on that day, how much money you've got? Not at all. Does it come down to how many people used to like you in this world and were pleased with you? Not really. Does it come down to how much property you owned? Not really. Does it come down to how many degrees you have next to your name? Because there are certain cultures, all they pride themselves on is what? Is that I've got all of these degrees next to my name. No, not at all. So what does it come down to? Quran makes it clear that, we're telling you about the Day of Judgment, and we're telling you that you guys are going to be in a state of chaos, and those mountains which were grand will even be in a state of chaos. فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. But you who have got the heavy scales of good acts with sincere intentions, you're going to be living a very pleasant life, yes, and a life which is full of pleasure. And this is a fundamental point. You see, it's not about how many deeds you've performed. It's how many deeds you've performed with sincerity. That's the difference. When it comes to the mizan, someone can look at it and say, well, you know what? If I, for example, if I was someone who gave a lot to the poor, can that mizan of mine be very heavy? Yes, but firstly, did you do it with sincerity? Secondly, did you do it through haram to get to halal? Or was it done through halal to get to halal? Let me try and explain these facts for you. You see, someone can give away to the poor. And when he gives away to the poor, he may turn around and say, well, you see, I can't wait for the Day of Judgment because my scales are going to be really heavy. No, the scales aren't about what you gave away. It's what's the intention behind your giving away. If you look in the Quran, أَرَأَيْتَ الَّذِي يُكَذِّبُ بِالدِّينِ فَذَلِكَ الَّذِي يَدْعُ الْيَتِيمَ وَلَا يَحُضُّ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Abu Sufyan would give away from his camel meat, for example, towards the poor. But what was his intention? There was no sincere intention there. Someone who does acts just simply for the public assumes sometimes that his mizan will be what? Will be really heavy on that day. No, the heaviness of the mizan that Surah Al-Qari'ah speaks about isn't the number of acts you performed. It was what's the niyyah behind that act. Is that niyyah behind the act that I'm going out there for fame or publicity or wealth? Or is the niyyah for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and for the service of humanity? You find the Quran says, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. As for the one whose scales are heavy with sincere deeds, not just with deeds, And that's why you find, for example, someone will say, okay, I own a news agent or I own a supermarket. I sell alcohol, yes? But the money of the alcohol I will send to oppressed Muslims. Again, that scale will not be heavy for you. Why? The act may be a good act in the sense of the ultimate reasoning and conclusion, but you've gone through haram means. There was a time of the sixth Imam, there was a time of a person who used to think, you know what, on the day of judgment, my mizan is going to be really high. And they said to him, what do you mean? He said, well, I give towards the poor. Do you know how he used to give the poor? Imam Sadiq saw him one day, he used to steal an orange every day. Yes, and then for 4 days he sees him steal the oranges. And what does he do? He goes and he gives away these oranges to the poor. Until Imam Sadiq stopped him. He said, excuse me, what are you doing? He said, you know what, I'm giving towards the poor. He's like, yes, but you've been stealing. He's like, yes, I know. He's like, so what's your conclusion all of this? He said, I'm on plus 36. He said to him, what do you mean? He said, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that if you do one good deed, He multiplies it by 10. And if you do a bad deed, and that's only one sin. So I've stolen 4 times, yes, but I've given it away to 4 poor people. So I'm on plus 36. Because 4 times 10 is 40, minus the 4 that I stole, that's 36. Sometimes you find people when they think of فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ, they think, you know what, I'll do the good acts, but I'll do it slyly through haram means, and then Allah will give me great rewards on the day of judgment. No. The basis of the mizan, فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ, is that our acts, the basis of them is ikhlas. And the basis of them is that the niyyah is pure. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam, even when someone came to him and said, I wanted to be alongside you on the battle of Jamal, but I could not make it, he said to him, you'll be rewarded for having the intention of having wanted to join us. Islam is what? Is based on intention. Our acts, the basis of them is what? Our niyyah. When you want a mizan to be heavy, it's not about how many prayers you prayed. I guarantee you there are people who prayed prayers and half of them were to show off to the community that, look, I'm here praying. Yes? Even when we look at words like yura'un, for example, or riyah, it comes from which idea? It comes from the idea that I put myself in a position where everyone can see me. So فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. What is it referring to? It's referring to those people who've got the heavy deeds based on an absolutely pure intention. Their intention was not to go out and show to the world. Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib, so many beautiful examples from his life. In the battle of Khandaq, that moment when he's fighting Ammar ibn Wadd al-Amiri, yes? And as he's fighting Ammar ibn Wadd al-Amiri, the companions can't really see what's going on because there's all this sand everywhere and the desert sand is surrounding them. They see him walk away for a few moments, come back in. Again, they're wondering until he comes out and he is victorious and he says, Allahu Akbar. They said to him, O son of Abu Talib, we saw you enter, leave, enter and leave. What happened? He said, Ammar ibn Wadd al-Amiri was on the ground. I was about to strike him. He spat at me. I walked away. Because I never strike a person who angers me. I only strike someone who has angered Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Ali ibn Abi Talib could have easily turned around. And at that moment, he would have been seen publicly as someone whose mizan would be a heavy mizan on the day of judgment. No, but he knows what's my niyyah. When I've now about to strike Ammar ibn Wadd, because of what? Because Ammar ibn Wadd spat at me and made Ali angry. No, let me walk away. I walk away and then my niyyah is purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's the basis of all of our life. Can we make our life and all our acts purely for the sake of Allah? Every profession, whether you're a doctor, lawyer, finance, media, whether you're someone, for example, in the educational, academic field, doesn't matter. Go out there. Someone will say, but you know what? I'm not doing much ibadah. You are. You're earning a living. And if you're doing it for the sake of serving the religion of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ultimately, then this is an act. فَأَمَّا مَنْ ثَقُلَتْ مَوَازِينُهُ فَهُوَ فِي عِيشَةٍ رَاضِيَةٍ. He'll be living a pleasurable life, no doubt, because his intentions are the purest of intentions, yes? But then, how about the one whose mawazin Allah refers to as khaffat mawazinu, yes? How about that person who's got the light scales? Light scales doesn't mean literally there's a scale and they're putting deeds on top of them, yes? وَأَمَّا مَنْ خَفَّتْ مَوَازِينُهُ refers to this idea of what? It refers to this idea of acts which were performed, but the intention was not an intention that was pure. The sincerity was not sincerity that was to be rewarded. And you find such people have got nothing which they do for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In some cases they do it for their own ego, with their own arrogance. Yes, فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. You see here, when you look at فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, some say firstly, what is Hawiyah? Yes, Hawiyah, you see if in the time of the Arabs, if you've got this bird that's looking deep into an area where they want to capture something, that depth of that area is Hawiyah. With that ha at the end, ha at-tahwil, which magnifies something, yes? When you look at وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ, the ha at-tahwil is what? The ha at-tahwil is looking at this idea that there's a magnifying, yes? You might see it, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ, you might see it, for example, at Kitabiyah, that ha right at the end, that's magnifying. His abyss or his eventual end, that person whose scales have got no intention whatsoever behind their acts but for their own fame or to ridicule others, then he'll be in this really deep pit. A pit which is what? You wonder what it is. Again, we see the word وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. Same, at the beginning it said Al-Qari'ah, Mal-Qari'ah, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ Mal-Qari'ah. Do you know what this depth of this pit is? This is what? Narun Hamiyah. Yes? Narun Hamiyah is looking at this fire. But what a fire. If you think the fire of this world is something, 70 times the fire of this world is the fire of that particular hell. You therefore find that the Quran mentioned, yes? فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ مَا هِيَ. أُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ. Some say, why the word Some opinions are that the Arabs would mention this idea that when someone, for example, is in a stage of a calamity, they would talk about the fact that, may your mum fall off that particular cliff, yes? And here, therefore, when they're mentioning the word Hawiyah, they connect it with this idea that the cliff is full of depth. And likewise, you will be in a place where you're thrown, which is really at the pits of death. Because definitely, no doubt, the Quran is looking to refer the Arabs to their proverbs, to their sayings, to their poetry. So when an Arab would hear فَأُمُّهُ هَاوِيَةٌ, he'd know very well, you know what? Normally we talk about the fact that may your mother fall at the bottom of a cliff. And now the depth of this particular hellfire is even more than that particular cliff that you refer to. Therefore, you find that Surah Al-Qari'ah wanted us to understand that just in case you don't reflect on the Day of Judgment, then understand one thing. However powerful you are, however many children you have, however many properties you own, even you will be like that moth that is scattered in chaos. Even you will see a mountain that comes down to looking like a piece of wool right in front of you. Even you will begin to realize very clearly what Ad and Thamud belied will come to you. In the same way, Al-Haqqa Mal-Haqqa, وَمَا أَدْرَاكَ Mal-Haqqa, كَذَّبَتْ ثَمُودُ وَعَادٌ بِالْقَارِعَةِ. Likewise, if you belie the Qari'ah, then what awaits Ad and Thamud is what awaits you. But ultimately, you can be successful if your niyyah is pure in whatever you do. And that's why you see Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, when he comes out towards Karbala, he makes it clear. Have I come out? Some may be making rumors that I've come out for fame. Others may be making rumors that I've come out for wealth. Others may, until today, say Hussein went out for power. إِنِّي لَمْ أَخْرُجُ أَشْرًا وَلَا بَطْرًا وَلَا مُفْسِدًا وَلَا ظَالِمًا. I do not come out. Yes, I have not come out looking for wealth or power or indeed fame. But rather, I have come out. Why? I have come out to make sure to honor the sunnah of my grandfather, the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, and to follow the message of my father, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, to make sure that I enjoin that which is good and forbid that which is evil. And no doubt, that pure intention of that pure man lives in the hearts of many until today. That if we want our mizan to be a mizan heavy on good deeds, then try and take Hussein, son of Ali, as your role model. And forever you'll find that you'll be living in what is known as Aishat al-Radiyah. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh.